Come in, Ocean Sailor. Come in, Ocean Sailor.
The Ocean Sailor Podcast. Brought to you by Ocean Sailor Magazine and Kraken Yachts.
Welcome to Ocean Sailor Podcast, Episode 9, with me, Dick Durham, and with Dick Beaumont.
Hi, everyone.
The pair of us today will be talking with Michelle Segrest, who has set herself up as something of an expert on mal de mer. I don't know if that's something you suffer from, Dick, is it?
Yeah, well, Dick, it's a subject close to my heart because when I was a young kid and really into middle age even, I used to suffer real big time with seasickness. I was big into diving in those days and to try and overcome it and continue diving, I used to have to kit up on the beach, get in the boat with all my gear. My mates would take the boat out and drop the anchor and I'd roll straight over. So, you know, that's how bad I was. And, you know, Michelle, what Michelle is saying is particularly, or her point of view, I think, which we'll find out obviously in more detail, is that she claims that everybody has had it. I think I've met quite a few people actually over the years that have never had it. But you know, and what we're going to do, of course, Dick, subsequent to this on Ocean Sailor, we're going to do a poll, and we'd really like to hear.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'd really like to know those that say they've had it and those that claim they never have. And I can tell you, on the various voyages that I've done, I bet you've had it the same, Dick. If I had a tenner for every time somebody had said to me, oh, yeah, look, you know, don't worry, Dick, you know, I never get seasick, to then see their backside as they're hanging over the rail some, you know, and half an hour later or something, as soon as we get out, you know, I'd be a wealthy man. And, you know, but Michelle's point of view, I think, isn't that you can actually cure it. What she says, though, and I think this is a very valuable thing for a lot of people, is there's lots you can do to mitigate it. And I'm really interested in hearing what she says. I've used some things myself over the years of ways of really planning for it. And, you know, it's going to be good, very interesting to a lot of people I know.
I think it will, because as you rightly say, there isn't anybody I know who has not suffered feeling ill at sea. That is to say, they may not have actually vomited, but they felt queasy or rough. I certainly have, although I claim that I've never been seasick. I have been sick at sea, which is a bit different. Perhaps we'll go into that, explore that a bit more later on. But her book, I think, is called How to Battle Seasickness. 100 tips, I believe, Dick, to at least combat it.
Yeah, she does. And some of them are a bit out there, and my jury is out on some of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I won't spoil it. I won't spoil it by preempting what they are. We'll just bring Michelle on and have a good old chat about it, and see where that goes, eh, Dick?
Absolutely. Let's see what she's got to say. Welcome, Michelle Segrest. Have I pronounced that properly?
Yeah, Segrest. You got
Segrest?
it.
Good. Welcome to Ocean Sailor Podcast. You've got a subject which is not exactly dear to people's hearts, sailors' hearts, but certainly one that they all consider, and we all suffer from it, or according to you, we all suffer or we're liars. So I think we can expand on that, I think.
That's right. That's
but
right.
You've had a lot of experience sailing a long way in a very short time in a steel ketch, I think, Michelle.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
And I'd just like to say hi and welcome to Michelle. And the funny thing is that my first boat was also a steel ketch, and we didn't. So we've got some common ground there. The good thing about steel boats is you can't. They're pretty bomb-proof.
That's exactly right.
The bad thing generally is they need half a gale to get them going.
That's exactly right. They're not exactly speed racers. You're not going to win any races, but they're nice, sturdy battleships that you can count on in those heavy offshore conditions. But I would say that this particular boat was not the greatest for seasickness. You know, it was designed by Dutch designers, and it was built specifically for North Sea conditions. And so it's a great battleship. It's great for heavy offshore conditions. But the problem is it's a very narrow boat and it sits very high up on the water. So there's a lot of motion.
Yeah, and did the boat have a steel deck as well as steel hull?
Absolutely. Steel deck, steel hull.
Which equally means that whilst the deck is also equally strong, you've also got quite a lot of weight high, which
right.
again induces more motion.
That's exactly right.
So you've had the perfect test runs.
That's right. The good thing about this particular boat is it has a center cockpit, which I really like because it's about 4 feet deep all the way around on all 4 sides. And so I felt very safe always. You would really have to try hard to fall out of that boat.
Yeah, I think that's actually, a very key issue. You'll have noticed that all Krakens are center cockpit.
Oh, that's the way to go.
And again, coming back to your subject here this evening, with a center cockpit, you are in the position of the boat with the least movement.
That's right.
That doesn't mean you won't get seasick, of course, but it does mean that you've mitigated it to some extent.
Yeah, I do think boat design makes a difference when we're talking about dealing with seasickness. There's no question. The other problem with this particular boat is that you could not manage the sails from inside the cockpit, except for the Genoa. That's the only sail that you can manipulate from the cockpit. So to do any reefing, to do any hoisting or lowering of sails, or to change sails of any kind, you had to get out on the deck. And when you don't feel well and you're suffering from seasickness, that's not a great feature for a boat. I know a lot of the newer designs you can operate all the sails from in the cockpit. I love the boats that have that feature.
Yeah, I mean, all Krakens, you can sail the boat, including hoisting, setting, trimming, all of the sails, from the cockpit.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, whilst I agree that being out of the cockpit is not perfect when you're feeling seasick.
That's right.
I don't think, other than the fact that if you're on the cockpit, and I'm sure you would agree, being outside in the fresh air with your eyes on the horizon is certainly going to help the situation.
I think every sailor on the planet would agree that is the number one seasickness tip that you can have. I mean, that's always a good idea, to be out in the fresh air, look at the horizon. Those are typical tips that you're going to hear from any sailor. But as we're talking about the book that I wrote, How to Battle Seasickness, it has 100 tips that will help you. And I like to say that, of course, you already mentioned this earlier, that I do believe that there are 2 kinds of sailors: those who get seasick and those who lie about it. But we had a conversation earlier. I think you convinced me that maybe there's a chance that maybe not every sailor gets seasick, but I do think it's something we all think about, and it could happen to anyone.
It's very interesting you should say that, because I mentioned before when we were speaking before this that I know a couple of guys that claim never to be seasick, and I happen to have just been out on 5 days of diving with both of those guys, and in context of this discussion that we're going to have, I sort of tried to get them to fess up, as it were, about hey, look, you must have felt queasy at some point, or come on, there must have been one particular time maybe you were hungover or in a particularly awkward sea. And both of them said, no, I'm lucky. No, I'm good. I said, oh, right, okay. So maybe there are 1 or 2 out there.
Maybe.
But I think Michelle, this subject will attract a huge amount of interest because I think everybody would love to hear you come up with the magic solution that solves all of their problems.
Well, I wish I had that magic solution, but I have some great tips that will help.
Certainly, on the first tip that you mentioned, Michelle, i.e., get some fresh air. Everybody knows that. Well, if you look at that boat behind my head, I'll just move it.
Yes, I can see.
You can see that you
Lovely
have to go
boat.
on. You have to go on deck to raise the sails.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that air does help you. But if you've ever been seasick and had to go to the bow to furl, the Genoa, that was tangled, and you're on the bow of the boat where the motion is the worst, that is not where you want to be.
No,
it is not where you want to be if you're feeling queasy or feeling sick. But you have to go. You have to go and take care of what needs to be done to keep the boat afloat. So
in that situation, you've clearly been in that situation.
I have clearly been in that situation.
How did you handle it? What was your remedy for that particular mal de mer?
What I wanted to do was throw myself overboard.
Right.
But no, of course, you just have to fight through it. And I think this is the point of this whole book, is when you're prone to seasickness, as I am, on almost every passage, I have epic battles with seasickness, but I want to be out there. I love to sail and I want to be out there. So knowing that I'm going to probably have this happen to me on every passage, at least in some degree, sometimes it's worse, sometimes it's not as bad, but it does affect me. It's helpful just to know that there's some things you can do. So in that case, you get the job done as quickly as possible. And I will say that if you do have a task on deck and you're feeling bad, and it does add to the queasiness, of course, to be on the bow, especially. But sometimes doing that task helps because it takes your mind off of how you feel, and it distracts you and keeps you busy and makes you feel productive. Just like the old tip that also every sailor knows: grab the wheel. Turn off the autopilot and take the wheel and take control of the boat. And when you do this, of course, you take control of the motion to some degree. If not really, then at least psychologically, you're controlling that motion of the boat and you feel in control. So
because that's the point you make quite strongly in the book, isn't it? That psychology is one of the major strands of perhaps the cause of seasickness, suggesting that maybe, some of these things like holding the wheel or holding a bit of rope, it's almost a placebo effect, isn't it?
It is, and I think there is definitely a psychological element to it. Especially because if you've ever been seasick, you don't want to be seasick again. You just don't. It is so miserable. It really is. Look, we've all had the stomach flu. We've all most of us have had a hangover at least once in our lives. So we've all had food poisoning maybe. This is nothing like that. I'll take any of those things over seasickness anytime. This is different. This is pure misery. And you will do anything. You will do anything to quell that feeling and to help yourself get through it. And I think the experts agree that there's really no cure for seasickness. There is no magic pill that you can take. So knowing that, the best thing you can do is quell it and make it better. Work your way through it so you can get to the other side of it.
So when you mention experts in your book, you do talk or you quote quite a lot of experts.
Yes.
So I guess you've gone to them and spoken to them.
I have talked to sailors and sea captains and fishing captains. I've talked to boat operators. I've talked to doctors and psychologists. Right. And when I'm experiencing,
but you've been seeking the Holy Grail, haven't you?
I've been seeking the Holy Grail, and I think the best I could find was tips. Yeah.
I suffered dreadfully when I was a kid from seasickness, and actually that went all the way through my adolescence and young life. I got into diving when I was 16, and I was so bad for seasickness, even on a flat calm day, out on an inflatable dinghy going 2 or 3 miles offshore is all in the main. It sounds unbelievable, but my mates knew I was so bad. I left the shore fully kitted, ready for diving. And as soon as the anchor went in, I knew I was going to be really bad at that point. I wasn't great on the way out. So I'm going out with all my dive gear, tank, regulators, the whole lot on. Ludicrous thing to do, really, but I needed to do that. As soon as the anchor went in, I put my hand on my mast and bang, I was over. And here's another weird thing. I don't know why this is, but as I said, from diving perspective, I can tell you it's certainly correct. You sit on the boat and you're seasick. You jump in the sea and the sea is moving the same as the boat, and now you're not seasick. I don't get that really. But my point is that I was that bad, and over the years, I think in a similar way to yourself, I was determined that I wasn't going to be beaten by it, and I wanted to go sailing and I wanted to go diving. So I'd sort of grit my teeth and get plenty of tissues and cloths and stuff like that, and I'd go. But in later life, although I still had it, and the more I sailed, there's no question in my mind, the familiarity of being on the sea and allowing your body the opportunity to come to terms with it and get some form of balance. As the years went on and the longer I was at sea, then the less I was seasick. But I was still on occasions, particularly on what I call a corkscrew sea, where you got wave trains coming from two directions and the boat's kind of doing this corkscrew motion. Particularly that used to make me feel bad, and particularly in the first 2 or 3 days back at sea, same as most people, I think. But then I copped something called Meniere's disease. And Meniere's disease is a really debilitating condition. They don't know what causes it, but they know that each side of your ear balance is not working on an equal basis. So the brain starts to get different messages from one side of your hearing balance, or your ear balance, your inner ear balance, to the other. And basically it says, no, I can't work this out, I'm out of here. And the whole world spins at a terrific speed, and it's pretty bad. The consultant that I found explained to me that the reason my eyesight and my eyesight balance and my ear balance was now improving quite rapidly in terms of seasick is because my brain was rejecting the information from my hearing balance and relying only on my eyes. And he told me it's the disparity between what your eyes see and your ears feel. And your eyes are saying, look, the horizons and it's all moving, and the brain's saying, but I can see stuff that's not moving. And hey, and your ear balance is counteracting it all. And so
this is exactly the research that I saw. This confirms.
And I now don't have seasickness at all, and I can go and go and lay down in the bilge and fix stuff. It's brilliant. I'm not going to suggest that you try and get Meniere's disease to quell it.
No. I would not.
So I can fully understand where you're coming from.
Yes. I think I've tried everything, really. I really wanted some of the pharmaceutical remedies to work for me, and I did try a lot of those. But most of those will make you drowsy. Any of the seasick medication, and I mentioned a lot of them in the book. And just as a caveat, I do want to say I don't recommend any chemical medicine to anyone. I really don't recommend it at all. You should talk to a doctor. And I really, because I don't know.
Is that because they don't work?
Well, I think it's because I don't know what other medication you're taking and what your health is and that sort of thing. And so I'm not a doctor. If there was a medication that worked for me, I would recommend it. But to me, I just think you should talk to a doctor. But I tried them all. I tried things that were not approved by the FDA, but a sailor in Sweden gave me some pills, and said they were magic pills. I tried those. They didn't work. I tried the patches behind the ear. I tried the wristbands. I tried everything. And the medication made me so sleepy and gave me such a bad headache. And when you're on a 2-person crew and you have to take your shift every 2 to 4 hours, depending on what the situation is, you can't be drowsy. It's just not safe, and it's not okay. You just can't be falling asleep and not have your wits about you. And so to me, the cure can't be worse than the condition. No, right. So that made me feel worse. So somewhere along the line, I just said, you know what, no matter how bad I feel, I'm not taking any more medication. No. I'm just not going to take any more medicine. I'm going to try to work my way through it with some of these other tricks and tips. And I started just trying to test things that might work. I talked to every sailor I met out there. I talked to other professionals and tried to get as much information I could. And I think you just try it and see what works for you. It can't hurt, right? It can't hurt to try some simple techniques.
That you haven't yet found it. You haven't yet found what works.
No, I mean, I think
you haven't conquered it. You haven't
conquered it. I still get seasick, but I can handle it much better now. And part of it is because I just accept the fact that I'm probably going to get seasick. Another point is that I try to do things to help the seasickness events be not so horrible. And by that, I mean, I try to stay hydrated. I try to keep something on my tummy. I try to make sure that I don't eat anything that is going to upset my tummy further. So, for example, if spicy food upsets your tummy on land, it is definitely going to upset your tummy at sea. If fatty foods or fried foods or acidic foods, like when I was sailing, I really couldn't drink coffee. It was a little acidic for me. You know, I needed tea. I needed ginger tea instead of coffee, which I love coffee. And I'm a big time coffee drinker, but I couldn't drink it at sea because the acid was kind of bad for my tummy. And so you just start to learn, okay, would I rather, and also alcohol, you know, don't drink alcohol because that can really dry you up and dehydrate you. And so would I rather have a glass of wine or would I rather be seasick? And the answer is always, you know, or I would rather not be seasick. So the answer is always, I'd rather not be seasick. And if foregoing that glass of wine or that beer or whatever, or that cup of coffee or that fried food, if that's going to help me, then I'll do it.
Yeah. So really, what you're saying here, Michelle, and I do agree. You're really saying there's no cure all. Take this pill and everything will go away. But there's a lot of small incremental differences you can make to your well-being, to your diet, to your attitude of mind that will overcome the worst of seasick. Now, I think am I right? That's where you're from?
I believe this to be true. I do. I think you're exactly right. But there are things you can do. Yeah.
The only thing I just want to say, and you said it earlier, you know, you have to grit your teeth and you have to go and do it.
Yeah.
And I know that's true, but I have had some pretty difficult experiences of trying to rely or accepting that people will try and battle through, or thinking that they will try and battle through and still do their job. And I just think that should be borne in mind. I once had a crew on a previous boat, and his responsibility for this particular trip, we had a whole set of daily checks. Check the raycord, check the oil in the compressors, check the oil in the generator, in the main engine, check the bilges, check the bilge pumps are working, and all of those things. And I had a big checklist. I believe in that. And then anybody can look at it and go, oh yeah, well, it's been done. Or no, it hasn't been done. There's maybe 24 things to do. And it's 15 to 20 minutes of work. Because all of these things should be in easy view. Check the sea chest, for example, make sure they're not full of weed and da-da-da. And I, as the skipper of the boat, checked his log and good, okay. And he was suffering bad. He was suffering very badly from seasickness. And I thought, well, give him his due. He's gritted his teeth and he's going to done it. And then about 500 miles out from Ambon in Indonesia, in flat calm seas, the boat stopped. And then, okay, what's going on here? Wayan, the guy, was still not feeling sick because although we were motoring, there was a nasty swell. So I now go and think, right, okay, where am I going to start? So I'm going to start the raycords. And I go down to the raycord filters and they're completely full of water. And what's actually happened is a deck filler has not been properly tightened down. When we were bashing hard upwind, water has gone through the tanks, got into the tanks, gone right the way through the fuel system, right the way through the injectors, and I got complete nightmare. Now, it is true that we parted company not long after that, but I waited till we got to port, you'll be pleased to know. But my mistake And his excuse, by the way, was he felt so seasick, he just ticked him up quick. And of course,
Right.
that's then a double disaster waiting to happen. It then took us, because there was very light winds. It then took us, 400 miles was going to take us, 3 days. It took us 10 days to actually get in, and then I got to have mechanics on board, go all the way through the whole system, and it was a pretty big nightmare. And I've had that in other situations, and I want to put something to you and see how you feel about it. I don't know if it's people's psychological standpoint that enables them to grit their teeth and get on with it. In other words, they've got some get up and go, they've got some fight. I can't tell really in the people that it's happened to me whether it's that, whether those people that got on and did it as you did and as I have done, and I'm sure Dick has done, and Tristan too, but or it's that they were really even more sick than I'd ever experienced and just couldn't do anything. I don't know what you think.
Yeah.
Could that be possible?
Of
I kind of
course.
felt I've felt a circumstance after that it was my mistake. Obviously, it's always your mistake as a skipper. That it was my mistake as a skipper relying on somebody that was, inverted commas, ill. Now, why they were ill didn't really matter. The fact is they weren't carrying out their duty. And I don't know if it's... I'd like to agree with you that I can grit my teeth and even when I'm feeling dreadful, still carry on. And you obviously said, you've done that. But I don't know if there's another level of seasickness that debilitates people to such an extent they are just useless.
I think, no, I think there have been times that I have been useless. But normally that's when maybe there's one other person on the boat and you just kind of succumb to it and you say, okay, there's somebody else out here that can help me. And so I just pass out and give up and I'm done. But if you're on a 2-person crew and you have to take a shift, especially if the other person on the crew is also seasick, that you have to do your part. You have to get through it. But I have an interesting kind of comment to this because this brought up something that I remember a sailor telling me. So I talked to a sailor who was in the German Navy and he was on a destroyer. And so there were hundreds, maybe thousands of sailors on that destroyer. I'm not exactly sure, but a big, huge, gigantic battleship, right? And they had to keep seasickness journals and turn them in, ever so often. I'm not exactly sure if it was weekly or daily or but they had to keep it. And of course, if they were seasick on deck and they threw up, they had to just keep going, whatever task they were doing, but they had to keep a journal of how they felt. And then if they were going to battle, the admiral or the commander or someone would look at those seasick journals and decide whether that ship was fit for battle based on the seasickness journals. Because if you can't possibly do your duties, especially in a life and death situation because of seasickness, I mean, this is how much they respected seasickness as a debilitating phenomenon or disease or whatever you want to call it. So it can debilitate you, absolutely. But the psychological tricks that you can do to help you through when there's 2 of you and you're both sick, somebody has to sail that ship.
Well,
or
you die, right? I mean,
or you die, exactly.
and you've got to take that responsibility fully when you go out to sea. I think you have to.
Yeah, we're not talking about bikini and martini sailing here. We're talking about heavy offshore sails where the sea is a hostile environment for humans. Let's face it, and that boat is what keeps us alive. And if somebody's not sailing it properly, yeah, you can die.
So when you go then, Michelle, and
Yes.
you're always seasick,
right?
Are you not being irresponsible, especially as there's only 2 of you?
This is a very good question. I think you could argue that. You could. So, yeah, you could argue that. I don't really know how to answer that because it's
but I
a good
guess-
point that I haven't really thought about. But yeah, it is irresponsible. But I think in the beginning, when you're just working it out and you're out there because you want to be out there so badly, maybe it's selfish and maybe it's irresponsible, but you don't want anything to keep you from being out there. I mean, I'm also a tennis player and I've played with a torn rotator cuff. I've played with a bum knee. I've played with a broken foot. If you want to be out there, of course, that's not a life and death situation, but if you want to be out there enough, you can find a way to make it work.
And the chap or the lady that you sail with, they know that it's a regular person you sail with, is it? Or
well, I mean, I sailed the world with one other person, but I sail
Right.
with different people on different days, in
but
different
on
situations.
that when you sailed the world with that other person, he
Right.
or she knew that you had this.
Yes. It
issue.
was a man. He was a really good,
Right.
experienced sailing captain with
Okay.
almost a lifetime of experience. Was a very good sailor, but he also suffered from seasickness badly, in some cases worse than me. And therefore, we both just kind of had to work together to figure it out. But for example, we were both seasick sailing through the Bay of Biscay. And you guys know that's a challenging body of water to cross under any conditions. And it was rough. But once you're there and you're in the middle, you're out about 200 miles or something like that, you're committed. You can't turn around and go back. You can't just anchor.
Listen, this is, you're right on the money, and I think I exactly understand where you're coming from.
But there were things we did. For example, we switched from 4-hour shifts to 2-hour shifts. So you make adjustments.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I've got a but.
So you make those adjustments to kind of help each other out.
I've got a but here, Michelle, and my but is that actually there's a difference in people. There are fighters, and there are those that talk a good fight, and there are those that give up. And I've witnessed those. I've had crew of each of those sections, and Dick and I have talked about the psychology of sailing oceans. And it is astonishing because people that start off on a trip as shy and retiring and quiet individuals turn into the people you can count on. And other big tough guys that walk the walk and talk the talk just crumble. And I think that really seasickness is one of those things that we can say sorts, the phrase sorts the men out from the boys. And that, but I want to put a big caveat on that because I don't think there's any real bravado in not suffering from seasickness. There's bravado in suffering from it and just being bloody minded and saying, well, I'm still going to do what I've got to do, as you have just described and as you have done. But there are other people with much less excuse than they're feeling seasick, step backwards instead of forwards when the proverbial hits the fan. And I think, I think we can say Scott of the Antarctic was a different caliber of person than the average guy. Certain, Ellen MacArthur, a different type of psychology, a strength of character. For somebody to record themselves suffering misery, crying and saying she hated every minute of it, and then the next thing you see she's up the mast at sea and sailing the boat and repairing the boat, that's a different caliber of person. And I think that what's coming here, and I find it very, very interesting, I think what's coming here is that people have got to know about themselves and their inner self and their steel, and decide before they, trip off across the Atlantic or whatever, are they going to put themselves forward or are they going to put themselves back? And, I think there's a different thing really, but.
No, I agree with you. And I think there's a difference in, okay, if you're out there sailing and then you experience seasickness for the first time, this in itself sometimes separates the men from the boys, as you say, because some people just will never go back out there again.
Mm.
And we know this, right?
It's logical
we've
not
known
to.
people. Okay, and then there's some people, exactly, and you wouldn't blame them.
No.
You understand, and it's okay, and there's no shame in it. But the people who truly view sailing as a passion, and they're not going to let anything stop them, they're just going to find a way. And I think this is why I wrote the book, because I was so desperate to find some way to stay out there and to also be a good sailor. As you said, I mean, this is important to also be able to perform your duties. And I would say this too, that when the captain was extra sick, that's when I stepped up. And when I was extra sick, that's sometimes when he stepped up. So sometimes that is kind of a thing, you kind of get used to each other that way. And it's like, okay, it's your turn to be sick.
Yeah.
you got to be sick now, and I'm going to take care of this. And
it is true to say that there is no shame whatsoever attached to being seasick. Of course not. I mean, I went on a deep sea trawler on a trip from Esbjerg in Denmark across the North Sea, and you know the North Sea very well. And it was a stormy night. It was rough and not very pleasant. But I was very surprised to find out that all those roughy-tufty Danish sea dogs, all of them were sick, and for quite a while. And then they got over it. And
that's right.
I said, crikey. They said, notice, first 3 days, we're always sick. We just accept it. It was their living. They've got no choice. Yeah. But that was when I found out that because it was a press trip and this Dane was going to drop his nets inside our 12-mile limit. We declared a 12-mile limit. And we were in the EEC, as it was then. And this guy said, well, I'm going to go and break your rules by dropping my nets. So it's a great story. All the press were there. Every one of them was sick along with the crew, except for me. I was the only one who wasn't sick. And so they were down below eating this fried plaice, which is beautiful fish, lovely. And I was scoffing all this fried fish, whoa, lovely. And I wasn't sick at all. And then, as we neared everyone else had been sick. In fact, I don't know if you remember, there was a famous phrase in the Falklands War from a BBC reporter who used to count the planes in and count them back. You remember he said, I counted them all out and I counted them all back on a carrier. I.e., they're all safe. That's what he sort of became his leitmotif. And there's,
I think I know where you're going with this.
Well, exactly. The Daily Express guy, he wrote a funny piece. He said, "Yeah, I had several fish. I counted them all in and I counted them all out." But anyway, when we got nearer to the British coast, they started to get the nets ready on deck, and when they started pulling them off the reels, the stink of rotting fish, that was it. I was then sick.
Oh, yeah.
So I always say I've been sick at sea, but I've never been seasick.
Right. And you can't probably identify whether it was seasickness or sickness from the stench of the fish. So it could have been that. And, I admire you and am jealous of you.
Well, I am quite fortunate. Don't get me wrong. I felt nauseous. I quite often feel nauseous. And rough. But I get up on deck and I immediately put me on the helm and I'm fine. I can stay on the helm for all night.
That's what works for you.
Yeah, definitely.
And you have to find what works for you. And I've tried a lot of different tricks, and some of them are psychological, and some of them are natural. Just ginger. Everybody talks about ginger, but the thing that works for me, I like ginger tea and ginger ale, and just about anything that has ginger in it is helpful.
I like ginger beer with rum in it.
Well, there you go. That's what works for you.
You're not supposed to be having any alcohol, Dick.
Well, I mean, alcohol doesn't affect everyone in the same way. No. For me, it dehydrates me a little bit. And if I'm not so when I'm drinking with friends or whatever, I have a glass of wine, then I need a whole glass of water before I can have another glass of wine, or I'm just, dry, and it's just
you sound like a good date.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Not too expensive. Just one or two drinks and that's it.
Yeah. Way back when, I did my Yacht Masters practical course. And the guy that took the course, a guy called, and very proper, Anthony Williams, he was a British Navy navigator, and he taught us navigation brilliantly. And then we are going to sail from Gosport on the south coast of the UK across to the Channel Islands. And I happened to draw the short straw to be the first skipper, and so I've got a 6-hour skippership, and I listen to the forecast, and it's force 6 on the nose, coming in at southwesterly or westerly as it always does in the channel, and because there's 6 guys and we all want to go, so I've called the trip on, and off we go, and Anthony Williams has said nothing at all, and I've called the trip on and out we've gone, and my obligation was to give a position fix on the hour, and as we get out of the lights of St. Catherine's Point, I'd start to feel ludicrously seasick, and I still got to give my position. I don't want to fail, so I'm going to go. I'm down there, and I'm really getting the game quick because I'm very fast now. I want to be below as short a period as time, and so I'm doing my position fix in 10 or 15 minutes, racing to the companionway, leaning over the rails, talking to the gods, and
feeding the fish,
getting back together get myself back together for another 45 minutes, looking at my watch. Oh no, I got to do it again. Back down, and I think it was a deliberate ploy because he's allowed me to continue on, and then as I came down for perhaps my 5th session, he came down with a glass of rum in one hand, smoking a pipe, leaned over me, blew some smoke over me, wafted the rum over me, and said, "So that's where you think we are, Dick, is it?" That was good enough. I couldn't do it. I was sick again immediately. The smell of the rum and I said, "I'm turning back. I don't care if we fail. I'm turning back." And Anthony Williams said, "Yes, it was if you didn't turn back that you were going to fail." And so, but he used that trigger that Dick's just talked about with the smelly fish. He used the smell and the smoke and to trigger to really bash me into submission, obviously, and I went back. I think the unfortunate thing is that many people will be listening and their hopes will be dashed that you can't tell them to press a certain nerve on their wrist or take a pill and it'll all be over.
Right.
But what I think you can do, and the message that I'm getting from this, is that actually you can get through it, you can get over it, and it doesn't need to stop you doing something you love. I think that's the key, isn't it, Dick? Do you agree? Michelle?
That's exactly right. I agree 100%. Yeah.
I do agree with Mich, absolutely. But I think it's great that Michelle has put together this book, which we should name, by the way. We'll put it in at the end, of course, but How to Battle Seasickness, 100 tips to help you get your sea legs. And that's the whole point. There are 100 tips in there, and you probably try them all, as Michelle has done. But she's learnt from that she knows it's kept her going. She's researched it. She's still sailing, and knows, and presumably the situation's improved somewhat.
It has. Absolutely it has, because now I know what to expect.
Because at least you've taken the psychology out of it.
Yes, and I use the psychology too.
Right.
I think this is key as well. So there are some psychological tricks. For example, if you want me to share some, I would love to.
Yeah.
For example, when I start to feel the queasiness come on, I remember kind of what Dick was talking about earlier about you remember what is causing this, and it's a cross wire signal, from your ear and your inner balance system to your brain, right?
Right.
And so you try to trick that. You try to trick that crosswire by distracting it. And so I will do things like, for example, I will recite the Greek alphabet. So, and why is this a trick? Well, if I recited the American, English alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, that takes no brain power. I can do that without even thinking, right? But if I recite the Greek alphabet, I have to really concentrate. Right. I have to think about it. Or maybe I'll count to 100 in Spanish or German or something. So if I count to 100 in English, that takes no brain power. But to really concentrate on something that's not natural to you really does work.
Sorry, I'm laughing.
It distracts you.
I'll tell you why I'm laughing, because you've just said, you're going to recite the Greek alphabet and then you're going to count to 100 in Spanish or maybe German. And of course, Dick and I are English, so English people don't have the ability to speak foreign languages generally. We just speak English louder and expect everybody to understand us, don't we, Dick? So
Well,
it's
I'm kind of that
fantastic
way
that you
too.
were able to do that as well.
And I'm from
Yeah.
the South too, so my accent limits me from speaking any foreign language. No one can ever understand me when I speak another language because it's
Oh,
always
that's
got a
shame.
little bit of a Southern drawl, and there's not much you can do about
Nothing
that.
wrong with that.
The Sweet Home Alabama always comes out.
Yeah,
I
good
cannot
stuff.
hide it. But little things like that, and I would love to tell you a little story. So I have this fantastic lifelong friend. Her name is Evie, and she's a fantastic sailor. She's been sailing since birth. She's from Germany, grew up there, sailed on the Baltic Sea all her life, and she's kind of my sailing mentor. And I just think she's amazing. And she's gone on very long sailing journeys, similar to the one I went on. She's done it several times in her life. And she was actually in a 7-meter wooden boat. And this is not a small task when you think about this. And she was also a sailing instructor. And she's another one of those, Dick, that claims she's never been seasick,
Okay.
But then she said, well, but there was one time when I came out on deck and everybody else was sick, and that triggered me, kind of like your trigger. But anyway, so she said when she was a sailing instructor and all the students would get seasick, that she would just tell them that if they held a potato in their left hand, that they would not be seasick. And so, of course, desperate to try anything, these kids would try this, or these students. They might not have been kids. They could have been adults. But so they tried it. They tried holding the potato in their left hand, and this mind over matter trick worked for them. And when I was battling my seasickness so bad, I called her and asked her for some tips, and she told me the story. And so I always kept a potato in the cockpit. And, it's crazy just having that potato there, knowing that I could grab it with my left hand if I wanted to, really made a difference. Isn't that, it's silly, right? But it's psychological.
It made a difference knowing it was there or actually using it.
Sometimes just knowing it was there really helped me. And I
You
remember
made a
one
good remark,
time,
because it'd get eaten.
I can remember one time I was sitting in the cockpit and it was really bad motion, and the captain looked at me and said, "You are white." And I said, "I know." I could feel the color leave my skin. And he just reached over and handed me that potato. And it made me laugh.
That's a great story.
And that really distracted me again. So little tricks like that will help. The worst thing you can do is think about being sick, like having that fear of being sick.
Yes.
It's really psychologically damaging.
Well, that was part one. I mean, one would like to think there wouldn't be a part two on such a subject, but it is dear to our hearts, if not our stomachs, and we must examine every facet of how to get over this terrible mal de mer. So we will have part two in episode 10, but Michelle's book, to give it the full title, is called How to Battle Seasickness, 100 Tips to Help You Get Your Sea Legs, and it's available in Kindle or paperback with Amazon. And Dick, we're going to have a poll, I think, to find out what
we
our
are.
ratings
As I said earlier, I think and you've said it. I think it's the elephant. Seasickness is the elephant in a hell of a lot of rooms. There's certainly dreams been ruined by seasickness, no question. One of my other interests, as you know, is diving, and I did have a dive centre at one point, and we trained people for diving, and it was an unwritten rule amongst the instructors: don't even mention seasickness, because it doesn't occur to most people, and they got themselves in the zone. They want to go out, they want to go and sail, or they want to go and dive, or they want to go out sea fishing, and hey, off we go, and off they go, and the next thing, the whole day is ruined, and they'd rather blow their brains out and then do it again. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have a poll on Facebook, and we really want people to get involved in this, because this is a big subject. And, as we've said, whether there are a very small percentage of people sitting out there that in fact don't suffer from and have never suffered at all from any element of seasickness. And let's qualify that too. I don't think seasickness means that you're physically throwing up. I think seasickness is experienced in the very first order by not feeling quite right, and then a sweaty sheen on your brow, and you've got it. And then
you feel queasy.
That queasiness, that's seasickness, not whether you throw up or whether you don't throw up. I think it's a bit irrelevant.
Well, in that case, I've certainly been seasick in that sense. It might be better to call it sea illness, perhaps.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. I think whatever you call it, however you dress it up, it's a right bugger. There's no question, it's a right bugger. So we want to know on this Facebook poll, come on, guys and girls out there, get involved. Tell us, talk to us about it. Give us your great tips as well, by all means. And perhaps we can we'll configure a way of how you can tell us, your great tip. The replacement of the potato, perhaps for a cauliflower or something else. Tell us your great tip, but tell us if you genuinely believe you've never had any form of seasickness. I think would be great information to find out. And I don't even know if anybody's ever really tried to define that. So Ocean Sailor breaks new boundaries again. Hey, that would be good.
Well, if there is somebody out there who can genuinely say hand on heart, hand on stomach that they've never suffered sea illness, then we'll bring them on and let's hear all about it.
Yeah, I know quite a few people that have said, no, I never get sick. I've never been seasick. So, as subsequent to us doing this interview with Michelle, I'm going to go back to those people and double check with them and say, well, so no queasiness, no slight, not feeling quite right, nothing. Just as good as you are on land. And let's see what they say.
Fair enough.
So that was, that was great. I really, I must confess, I entered that, the beginning of that podcast and that subject, thinking that what Michelle was going to do is come up with some all-fire cure. And to her credit, I think she doesn't. What she does say is there's a lot of things you can do to mitigate it, to help try and overcome it. You can't cure it, but you can certainly do things that improve your ability to operate and perhaps get through it. And I think, as she has said, pretty well all people, and it's my experience too, pretty well all people are over seasickness in 3 days. And there's no question, the more you go to sea, the less susceptible you are. So I suppose the message we can get from that, Dick, is go sailing more often, obviously, especially on a cracking yacht.
Yeah. I mean, well, indeed. There is no silver bullet, but there is an enamel bucket. Although even better, of course, on a cracking yacht, you get a better receptacle than that, of course.
So we got a lot going on. Just to mention, we've got a lot going on in Ocean Sailor magazine. It's quite a big issue, and it's particularly interesting for us because we've now got 003 version 2 of the Kraken 50 completed. She is in the water. She's out sailing. Next month we're going to do the commissioning and sea trial, but this month we're going to show people a fair bit about the interior finish, which we are particularly proud of, given the diligence and the quality of the Turkish craftsmen. So that's a big thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we're also, of course, got an article going on seasickness.
Yes, indeed.
And it's a fabulous story you did with Steve Callahan.
Crikey, yeah.
And about his rather unusual transatlantic crossing in a life raft and a sinking one at that. I mean, that's Absolutely. An incredible story. And I'm. Dick, you as a journalist, you must have picked up on it. He came up with one phrase And I've never heard the equal of it. I had a view of heaven from a seat in hell. What a statement.
Yeah, what I love about that statement, apart from the fact that, as you rightly say, it's original, I've never heard it ever before from anyone's lips, and not much in this world is original. But the reason that I love it so much, and of course the reason it is original, is that it couldn't have come from anyone other than somebody who'd been in that position.
Yeah.
You couldn't really make that up. It's so authentic. It sends a chill down your spine. And really shows the juxtaposition of the poor devil there. I mean, because he's witnessing the beauties of nature, if you like. And when it was lovely weather and he was able to catch a bird and eat it or something, it probably wasn't too bad. But nevertheless, he's on a 5'6" rubber ring, 1,500 miles from land.
It sounds like he was doing, and of course you've covered also an article in the magazine about types of life rafts and what you should buy and what you shouldn't. It sounds like Steve pretty well did that crossing on what amounts to almost a blow-up paddling pool with a canopy on the top. It doesn't sound like he did it in the best of life rafts, eh?
Well, I think, of course, also, and he was on a very small boat, of course. The boat that sank was only 21 foot, so perhaps he didn't have room for anything much other than what he did have. And also it was a 1986, so a few years ago now. Perhaps I'm sure you probably know, Dick, that there were decent life rafts available then, perhaps not as good as they are now, I don't know. But
no, I think it's really materials
right,
that and obviously you've got instances like the Fastnet and
of
course the Sydney to Hobart disasters, that taught in one focused area. I think that taught an awful lot to people that were trying to come up with a better solution for those that do have to take to it. We take life raft stowage and deployment very seriously at Kraken, because I can tell you nobody does. Honestly, nobody does. People want to go and buy a life raft, for example, and they want to, I've bought a life raft, that's it. Well, that's not it,
No.
And the guy that you spoke to, Matt, he said, you want to spend the most money you can on your life raft and hope you never use it.
Yes,
and
of course.
hope your money's wasted, if you like, I suppose.
Yes, indeed.
But,
absolutely.
We got some a really good review written for us by a lady that wants to contribute to Ocean Sailor, all about Malta.
And it's very much a sort of a secret jewel of the Mediterranean, Malta. I often wonder why it doesn't get mentioned more. People, waffle on about Croatia and Venice and all the rest of it. But actually, Malta, Valletta Harbour, is as stunning as harbour as I've ever sailed into. And I think it might have something to do with the fact that Malta was once a colonial possession of the UK, that it's become a bit unfashionable, a bit sort of PC not to mention it. I don't know, but it never does get a mention, so I'm glad we have.
It's certainly getting a bit of a mention now because it's managed to achieve the hallowed status of the UK government of a green traffic light. And do you know what? So, I mean... And I'm expecting to sail there. I was hoping to go there this year, in this summer, but it might be next summer now because of all the constraints that are on us. But I've never been to Malta. It's one of the.
Have you not?
No, I've never been. So
you've got a big treat in store.
Yeah. Well, I read the article as it was going in, and I thought to myself, this is a bit weird. How come you've never been here? So. I mean, that's good. There's loads of really good stuff. It's a big issue of Ocean Sailor this month. Yeah.
Well, I think that's about it, Dick. The Technicolor yawn of destiny has impacted with the deck pizza of fate, and that's it. See you later.
Well, I don't know what makes me the sickest. Those gags at the end, or seasickness itself. Thanks, everybody. It's been
pass the sick bag, Alice, as they say.
Yeah. Thanks everyone. I hope you enjoyed the podcast.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.